Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Mental Health Matters. This is Tom Duff, Executive Director of St. Louis Counseling. If you're curious about St. Louis Counseling, go to our website, stlouiscounseling.org. Make sure you spell out Saint, stlouiscounseling.org. And so, as always, this podcast, we try to break down stigma. We try to talk about mental health in a way that makes it okay to talk about around the dinner table, to be able to differentiate between mental health, mental illness, emotional health, and all those components that go with that. And as always, almost always, sometimes I go solo and I try to, talk myself. A one-man show, right? But we have a guest again back today. Today we have local comedian Meredith Hopping. How are you, Meredith?
Good. Thank you so much for having me.
Excellent. I'm excited. Our mutual friend, as well as Midcoast Media, Chris Denman, introduced us. And I'm so excited because I think we'll have a good conversation about some, just life stressors.
Absolutely.
And then I'm always curious about the comedic world and everything.
Yeah.
So hopefully you're going to be really funny today and you're going to make me laugh.
No pressure.
Because mental health, it's about laughter, right? It makes us feel happy.
I have anxiety? No, I do, but yeah.
That's good then.
Yeah,
we can talk about that.
absolutely.
And then also in a way that might be engaging for people out there.
Definitely.
But, as we were kind of talking ahead of time, as we were getting set up here, we both went to the same school.
Yeah.
I have a feeling it was a couple years apart, probably, right?
I don't know. I'm sure you grade very early.
Thank you. That's what I was going with. Yeah. So, we both went to Illinois State University, which means we both lived in normal
Illinois.
Illinois. Sometimes it's not so normal, is it?
No.
Yeah.
I graduated from Normal Community High School as well. I was a townie.
Oh, you were a townie that went on there.
Yeah,
we always pointed you guys out, like townie. Yeah, they knew their way around.
Right,
yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. What'd you major in there?
Theater.
Theater.
Yeah.
Sean Hayes also majored in theater.
Yeah. Sean Hayes was actually a music major.
Oh, really?
Not a theater major, but did some of the musicals. But we do have John Malkovich.
Oh, yeah.
And Laurie Metcalf and all the people who started Steppenwolf. So, yeah.
Nice.
Pretty good.
See, Illinois State has some claim to fame.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I was a criminal justice major. Ended up in
Nice.
social work.
Yeah.
It was a good time. We had a class where we had to follow our professor around, Dr. Morn. I'm sure he's listening. But part of the assignment was you had to pair up in groups, and then the goal was to trail him around town, and then he couldn't find out about it.
Yeah.
And that would affect your grade, however long you were doing it. Yeah. So, we'd be out in the bushes in front of his house waiting. And it was
Did he
really.
have a family?
Yeah,
Oh.
I know.
I wonder
So,
how they felt about
looking
that.
back,
Boundaries.
his wife was a professor at Illinois State as well
Okay.
too in minority relations. But I look back and I'm like, that was just weird
Yeah.
that we did that. But
Work-life balance.
yeah, we were in
Right.
college, so it was cool, right? Yeah. Well, anyway, that's enough of down memory lane, right?
Yeah.
Our Illinois ties. So, the world of comedy, right? So I'm always interested to know, how did you realize you were funny? Or how did you
Right,
realize you
right.
wanted to then go try it, right?
Absolutely. So I was a theater major. I focused more on opera, and always being a vocalist was kind of more my thing. And it wasn't until my senior year of college that I had a professor in an auditioning class that said, "Oh, Meredith, you're funny." I'm like, oh, that would have been, really great to have been focusing on and investing in these past 4 years. But then I just kind of let it go to the wayside, worked in mostly ministry, mostly youth ministry. And my ex-husband was a pastor. And it wasn't until I turned 30 and then I made a list of 30 things I was going to try since I turned 30. And trying stand-up comedy was one of those things. And so I didn't get around to it. And then I turned 33, and that February, Valentine's Day actually, had our third child. And between postpartum depression and the election, I don't know if it's safe to say that.
Oh, you're safe. It's a podcast, right?
So I was at my wit's end, and I'm like, I need something tangible. I need to go do something where there's a guaranteed response. People are either going to laugh or they're not.
Uh-huh.
And so I went and did my first open mic, and I was,
Wow.
yeah, that was it. I knew that that's what I had to do.
So going into that open mic, oh, I got several questions. But going
Yeah.
into open mic, did you script out some areas you were
Absolutely.
going to
Yes.
look at?
No, I did my research. I knew the closest comedy club to our house was the Funny Bone. I knew that you automatically got on if it was your first time ever doing stand-up, and I knew you could do 4 minutes. And so I had it all down. It was funny because the person who went right before me completely bombed. And I had all my friends and my then husband who were there texting me like, stop watching because your empathy is going to take over and you're going to be so distracted that you're not going to be able to focus and do yours. And so then I did it, and that first laugh it's really hard to describe how electrifying it is.
Wow.
Yeah.
Talk about a confidence builder, huh?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Was that the Funny Bone, the one up in Westport? Or was this before when there was
Westport.
one in Valley Park?
No,
too?
yeah,
Oh,
I'm
okay.
after Valley Park time.
Oh,
so.
okay, yeah. I've been. We had just moved, and I was like, "There's a Funny Bone." We're by Valley Park,
Okay.
and then I'm like, "There's a Funny Bone right there. This is crazy." And then it closed, and then I was like, "No, that's great." So two things you mentioned as we were talking already. So you mentioned like, "Hey, I got anxiety. Hey, I had postpartum depression, right?"
All the things.
And then you you got your check, right?
Right.
But then for someone who has anxiety to go do stand up, right?
Yeah.
That's gonna be a little
You know what?
nerve-wracking.
I think because people had said, oh, why didn't you do improv instead of stand-up? Like, why was stand-up your entry into comedy stuff? And I don't want to do something where I can't control other people. When it's stand-up, it's just me that I can control, and I can only blame myself if something goes wrong. And so it's interesting because even with all the, growing up, I was in all the music things, all the theater things. I didn't know yet that I had anxiety. And before every performance, I just could not control my energy. I could not control my mood, and we didn't know why. And it's interesting that with stand-up, I never have that. I don't get nervous at all. And it actually, when I did my first big weekend hosting for Nicole Byer, who's the host of Nailed It on Netflix, that dessert fail show.
Yeah.
I just remember, being ready to go out before they announced my name and just thinking of that Joan of Arc quote where she says, "I'm not afraid, I was born to do this." And so for me, comedy, that's what it is. And for whatever reason, I don't get nervous. I don't feel anxiety. It's just, this is what I have to be doing. So,
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
It's like it's comfortable.
Absolutely,
right?
yes.
Right. And then postpartum depression.
Yeah.
So you were kind of going through that at the time
Yes.
when you went.
When I started.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
My son would have been, so I had my son February of 2000, what year is it? 2017.
2000,
He was born in
okay.
2017. And then I did stand up June 27th of that same year. So he was about 4, is that right? 4 months. But yeah, and I had, so as my third child, I had postpartum depression with all 3. With the first one, as I'm sure many mothers can relate, you're too ashamed to admit that you're going through it because there is so much stigma, which is why I was so excited to do this podcast. And you just have this idea like you're supposed to be in complete love with your child, and this is what you were created to do. So isn't everything wine and roses? And when it isn't, you're really embarrassed about sharing that reality. And so I also, on top of it, had a very traumatic birth, which a lot of people don't. Again, it becomes that thing like, you have a healthy baby. Get over yourself. You should be happy. Whereas I had a completely natural labor with no medication for 21 hours and 2 hours of pushing, when I had to have an emergency C-section where they nicked my uterine artery.
Oh my goodness.
And I wasn't able to hold my daughter for like 6 hours. And so I had already, you know, I had read all the Ina May Garten, like the red tent, all the, you know, the biblical stuff. Like, this is what my body was made to do. And so to have that seemingly epic of a failure and then not be able to hold my daughter and all this stuff, but have everyone be like, you should be so thankful. It becomes, you kind of go inward and you don't want to share because you're afraid it might make you seem ungrateful, when the reality is, if we're not taking care of ourselves, everything goes to crap. I am a fairly clean comedian. I tried when I started. There was one joke actually about pooping while giving birth that I tried to say the S word. I don't know how edited
it's okay,
this is, but and it sounded so silly because it's not me. Like there are other comedians who sound great when they drop
flows
all
naturally.
The words. But for me it doesn't work.
You're more of a pooper or a crapper, right?
Yeah,
there
exactly.
you go. Yeah,
exactly. And so we don't do, at least in the church, I feel, and that's my experience. So I'm the granddaughter, daughter, and now ex-wife of pastors.
Wow, you've got full tutelage there, right?
Yes, yeah. And so I don't know, especially coming from a place of quote unquote esteem, right? The idea of admitting fault and admitting need, whether it's said outright or not, is something that is kind of inherent, that if I do this, I might affect someone, or I might affect someone's ministry, or all this stuff, when the reality is, and one thing as I've gotten older I found, is that I believe my faith, which is the Christian faith, correlates with the exact opposite, with transparency, with admitting need. And so I think that's just an amazing evolution I've seen in the 3 different births of my children, and that with the third, I was just like, this is what it is. This is what I'm dealing with, and I'm going to figure out things to do to help with it. And medication is definitely one of those things too. So
that was able to be an assistance then.
Absolutely.
Did you realize, so for the people that are listening out there, for a lot of us, like me, of course, as a male, I'm not going to understand fully,
Right.
So as you're talking, did you realize did you realize your symptoms, or were you at a state where, or did someone have to point it out?
I think that with our first child, I think I realized it and just wanted to deny it. And it was smart enough to not share with who would do anything about it, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And so they give you those surveys, like, and I'm like, well, if I say I feel like breaking the mirror, I know the cause and effect of
that
this.
Nurse is going to tell. That nurse is going to tell.
Exactly. And so I think we're led to believe that there's no middle ground. Like, you're either, and this comes too with people not understanding mental health and mental illness, like, you're either perfect and everything is peachy, or you're psychotic. And so for those that might find themselves in the middle ground, it can be really scary and really gray and hard to wade through. And that's, I think, one of the most important things. I've also recently, as I've said, my ex-husband gone through a divorce. And so
major stressor there.
Major stressor.
Right?
And people, we've got to have grace on both sides, because people do not know how to just sit in grief with people and sit in pain with people. And so the response is often either try to fix it immediately and find a solution, or ignore it and ignore the person. And both are pretty traumatic in their own ways. And so it's just been a really great thing going through, especially the divorce process, being able to see how other people have dealt with it. I actually have a bit that I do on stage about my mom trying to figure out, like, well, why do you think your marriage failed? And then we're talking about growing up, and she's like, you didn't really have anything traumatic happen growing up. And I'm just like, junior high? Like, I was already 6 feet tall and 110 pounds. Like, I was called Lurch by all the boys. It was traumatic. So, but not that that has anything to do with my marriage failing. It's just funny how people try to,
You had the perfect childhood.
Right.
Yeah.
Instead of just saying, like, I'm sorry, and it's okay that you feel awful. We don't hear enough. It's okay that you feel awful. It's always, look at what you should be grateful for. Look at, look on the sunny side of the street. When, if we don't acknowledge it, and I saw that very much so with the birth of my first daughter, because so much was pushed down and because so much wasn't dealt with, I realized that, like, every year on her birthday, I have a little bit of probably PTSD. Is what has been said to me, because it wasn't dealt with, and I wasn't allowed to acknowledge that my birth experience was traumatic, and that the bonding that didn't get to happen, I didn't get to have her on my chest, like all of that
Which is
factors
so
in
important.
so much. And so yeah, it's just been really interesting. It is neat though. With the birth of our second daughter, so it was a cesarean section because couple factors, but apparently, which this should have been a sign, my ex-husband and I's genetic recombination creates very hard-headed children. So all of them were born with completely fused fontanelles. So no soft spots.
Wow.
Yeah, so there's no, because I look like I'm 6 feet tall. I'm not tiny. I look like I should be able to birth a baby. And then my maternal grandmother, after the fact, also said, should I have told someone they had to break my pelvis both times I gave birth? And I said, yeah.
Oh, that would
Whenever
have been
you
good
mark
info.
down family history on things, that's really important info, Grandma.
I had to break my pelvis.
Yeah. So, and I wanted to try a VBAC, which is vaginal birth after cesarean, and Illinois has pretty hardcore, what is the...
Regulations
and malpractice, all of that. So there was no provider that, because of how it had happened, was willing to let me try. And so we had actually moved to St. Louis and had to drive back because of insurance stuff for the birth of our second daughter. And we got there and my OB had gone into labor.
Wow.
Like 2 months early. And so I'm just like, are you kidding me? Like, this was really traumatic the first time. And now I'm not. And the doctor that had been on call, I had heard, like, she's older. She has horrible bedside manner. I'm just like, this is going to be awful. And I'm just doing a lot of praying and a lot of trusting. And I get on the operating table and the doctor was very matter of fact, very But my doctor, because she was so young, I had asked, can I have the skin to skin? Because they're starting to do more gentle C-sections, which is amazing. She said, no, I'm not comfortable with that. And with all the drugs and everything, I'm afraid you might drop her. So that's going to have to wait. And I had just resigned myself to that wasn't something I was going to get. And so when the older doctor pulled my daughter out, she said, this baby's perfect, get her on her, and threw her on my chest. And it was one of the most redemptive moments of my entire life. And so that was really amazing and really beautiful. I also got my placenta encapsulated.
Oh, not everyone can say that. Not everyone can say that.
I'm all about medication for regulating and helping mental health. I also enjoy foraying into some of the hippy dippy stuff from time to time, and had researched this and wanted to try it. We had to fight to get it.
I was just going to say, were they even used to? Yeah.
Yeah, they were really not thrilled about it. There's only one placenta encapsulated. She was born in Bloomington, normal. There was only one placenta encapsulator who also worked at State Farm. And so she came in.
Everyone works at State Farm, right?
Everyone works at State Farm in Bloomington, normal, because it's the world headquarters for now. And so when she came in to finally give it back to me, she was like, I thought it was going to be dried out yesterday, but I'm so excited that it was so big that it took so long to dry out that it wasn't done until today because yesterday was an auspicious day.
Oh.
And so it's just my dad and I and my daughter in the room. My husband and my mom and our other daughter had gone for a walk. And so my mom comes back and my dad and I are losing it and telling her, and she's like, do we need to pray over those pills? And I'm like, Mom,
No.
she's at best Wiccan. Like,
Yeah,
come on.
exactly.
I'm not getting a lot of evangelical Christian placenta encapsulators in Bloomington Normal, Illinois.
Not going to happen.
No, but I felt that it helped, and it might have been just, pure, I'm thinking about this.
Yeah,
And that's
yeah.
why it's helping. But it's one of those little things like that. I think it's important for moms and anyone. If something is working for you and other people think it's silly, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. Essential oils or what, you know what I mean?
If
What is
people are
helping
willing
you?
to, yeah, exactly.
And so, yeah, I don't know where we were going.
Well, I think we're on the right path. All right. So, you mentioned people, not the grieving component, right?
Yes,
Or being there with somebody. I think you're so right with that because I think with grieving, a lot of times I can't tell you how many people I've worked with that have said, no one's asking, they've gone through something, they've lost somebody or something.
Yeah.
And they're like, people don't even ask or ask me how I'm doing. And so, the flip side is people are like, I don't want to upset that person because if I bring it up, they might become an emotional wreck or something, or they might start crying. But more often than not, you hear from people they want someone just to check in. And as you pointed out, it's just to be there and say, yeah,
it's just to be there.
I'm going to listen to you. I don't need to fix it. And, that's a huge part of counseling as well, too.
Yeah.
Of course, counselors are supposed to be good listeners and they're supposed to be able to provide interventions. But a lot of times it's about being there for the person.
Right. Absolutely. And it's interesting, with the divorce, because I was working with my husband and obviously worshiping with my husband, there was a lot of loss very quickly that occurred. And one thing I think we've really lost in our society with friendships and relationships that I look back and read books like The Red Tent or even biblical stuff, and I just can't even explain how many nights in my new apartment I would cry and just think, I just wish I had someone to hold me while I cry, someone to touch me, someone to even just say you're real, you're here. And I think we get so scared of that intimacy. We've been led to believe, I think by society and the media, that touching has to be this sexual thing and that we can't care for one another in that way. And yet there are how many studies proven about hugs and what they actually do for us. And so and I did lose a lot of friends that just couldn't
I'm sure that was really difficult.
Yeah. And honestly, the comedy community was amazing.
Support.
And so supportive. And I am so thankful. It was hard for me because I sat there thinking, and I'm already attending a new church that I love. Am I allowed to say that?
You can say the name.
Okay, yeah. The Gathering is the church that I'm attending, and I absolutely love it and sing on the worship team there. And but I just remember, in some of my quiet times with God, I had wanted these comedy friends to come to church. I think it's not a unknown fact that most comedians aren't big fans of the church. I would say I am definitely the odd man out with my faith in that community. And I'm just like, why in the world would this happen where they would see this harsh reality of, because my church did really turn its back on me as well. And I hate that they're seeing this. I hate that they might be turned off. And it was really them being able to see that I still sought after that relationship. They're like, why aren't you saying F you to God, F you to church? And I'm like, because my ex-husband is not God. And
correct.
My ex-husband's church is not the church. And so for me to throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak, would be denying myself something really, really life-giving. And so I actually have had some of them even church shop with me, which is, yeah, it
Wow.
was really neat.
Yeah.
And
Exposing
so,
people to a whole different
right,
world
exactly.
atmosphere. Yeah.
And I think that's a big part of my mental health journey has been just kind of trusting um, God or the universe or whatever one would like to call it. I actually had to after. So when was the eclipse?
Two, was that last year? 2017.
It was 2017
17.
in. Was it in
It was
like
the
June?
summer. Yeah.
Yeah, August. Okay, so in August, and I am on medication for anxiety and had to go off of it for the pregnancy, which is another thing that gave me so much empathy and awareness for drug addiction.
Uh-huh.
And this may be a little like deep for
Mm-hmm.
people or intense, but I had to go off of it, and I was like, this is why. Like, this is why people get addicted to drugs. It was painful. I was foggy. It was awful, and I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. And so I am not thankful I went through it, but I'm thankful that I have that perspective
can
now.
understand on a different
yes,
level. Yeah.
absolutely. Because I think it's so easy for us to be like, oh, you horrible person.
Why? Oh, that's a choice.
Right,
Yeah.
right, exactly. When, oh my goodness, if I could have made the choice to keep taking it, I would have been taking it. And so I needed to get in with a new psychiatrist in order to figure stuff out. And our insurance had changed. And so there was only one place I could go, and they were booked up for months, except for the date of the eclipse. And during the eclipse, like the time during the eclipse. And I was at that time a homeschool mom, and I'm just like, I'm gonna be the worst homeschool mom in the world if I'm not with my kids doing all the projects
the
about
expectations
the eclipse.
of it. Yes.
And two, like, I really want to see the eclipse. And I just felt this like still small voice continuously being like, you need to go. Like, you need to go and take, like, yes, this is a like life-changing event for people to view and see, but you have to take care of yourself first. And so I was like, okay, fine, I'm gonna go. But I took 2 pairs of eclipse glasses, and just in case. And when we got into the appointment, I was like, do you want to? I really want to see. And she was like, thank goodness. I really wanted to see it too. But
and you scheduled this appointment with me.
She's like, but I don't have glasses. And I was like, I brought an extra pair just for you. And where the office was at the time, there were also a bunch of nuns right there. And so we were all outside, like, and it was this deeply spiritual, just really moving thing. And I'm just like, this is what happens when we like listen to the universe and and prioritize our self-care. Like, beautiful, amazing things happen that we didn't have any idea were possible. So yeah.
Wow. Yeah, like you said, I mean, it's all meant to be sometimes,
right?
right?
Right, absolutely.
You know, you also mentioned, touch and the importance of that. We had a couple weeks back, we did a podcast with Soulshine, Barefoot Massage. Another plug to them. But, and we talked a little bit about that, and it's just like, you think about like seniors as well too, and they lose their loved ones, or they end up living by themselves, or they're in some type of retirement community, and the touch that they don't receive, and just how nurturing and valuable that is. And
and babies who don't get help, right? In orphanages.
And all the studies.
Yes, absolutely.
And so when you think then about, just that initial touch, like you said, after the C-section, after birth.
Right.
And that initial touch that you're craving as a mom, and then the baby, and that's where it starts in the womb, right? All the bonding and relationship. But right off the bat, when you're missing that, how would you describe that? Like you said, when she ended up on your chest, right? How would you describe, like, if, for a male who's listening, or someone else who, hasn't been able to put that into words?
I mean, it's a very, like, the endorphins are nuts, because it's like there's scientific backing to everything that's happening in our bodies. And brains and your hormones, and it's just like this thing that because like nature, women are created to have babies, and so it's like a fulfillment of like the end and also the beginning of a process. And so, yeah, it's just amazing.
Wow.
I'm not saying everyone should go out and have babies.
Yeah.
Just to have,
Oh no, I'm quoting
also
you.
Also pro-birth control. Try to make all my, yeah.
So when you talk about anxiety as well too, and medication and stuff, did you know, for a lot of people, medication doesn't work right off the bat, right?
I was very lucky in that the medication I was prescribed first is what worked for me, and I understand it does not always work that way, and so I've been very, very thankful. Also, the medication aspect, especially in the church, took me a long time to accept and have a willingness to do that and to admit it. And it's interesting, even now, like I'll talk to some people and they're just like, oh, there's still some judgment because in the church we're all about chemo for cancer, but when it comes to mental health, we get very like, oh, we don't quite understand. Like that's
pray it away.
Exactly. Pray it away is a very real thing. And I'm just like, no, if we're going to acknowledge what our bodies and science and all of that for this, we've got to do it for that as well.
Why is the brain any different than our heart or other parts? You know? The stigma is, like you said, it's still there, you know, and it's still embedded. I think, you know, younger generations seem to be a little bit more open, you know, but still, you know, we see it and we hear it. And, you know, you get into small towns and people look at where the car is parked. You know, we have clients that say like, oh my gosh, you know, so-and-so is going to know I'm here because, you know, and it's like, and we always try to clean up, you know, stuff as fast as possible, even though it's years and years and centuries of judging people. And so it's going to take a while to get rid of it. But, you know, having these conversations like this where people can acknowledge, like, yeah, I've got something and I'm dealing with it.
That's what I think. If everyone, I would be in therapy every single day if I could. If I had the time and the money, oh my goodness, it's wonderful. I was talking to someone earlier today and they were complaining because of Wimbledon. They were complaining about how Serena Williams, after she threw that fit, that she had to go to therapy before she was ready to apologize to her opponent. And I was like, we should all be in therapy. And they're like, well, never mind. I'm not going to talk to you about it. Like they were trying to make it a bad thing. I'm like, look at her humility that she was willing to say, I need to work through this to figure out why I'm feeling what I'm feeling.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. You know, because that's the thing. It's just ingrained sometimes, you know, or we're so judgmental on the medication, as you pointed out too, and because there's a lot of fears, you know, and
many.
Yes, there's side effects to every medication, right? And so you do have to pay attention to those things, but people are always afraid. You know, what you hear a lot of times, like, well, I don't want that get in there and to change my thoughts, you know, I don't want that to, you know, change me.
Right.
And like, do you say that when you take ibuprofen? Do you say that when you take, you know, your insulin, you know, things of that nature? And so somehow, you know, and it's about education and what it's really about and helping people kind of understand those things.
Definitely.
So, you know, do you practice your stand-up in front of your kids? Like, is that your testing ground or anything?
So I do a lot of it in front of them. Actually, one night the Funny Bone was not doing the open mic for some reason, and I took them they were doing a workshop instead, and I took them to Fuzzy's for Taco Tuesday, and then we went in to say hi to everyone, and they hadn't started the workshop, and so they actually let the girls go up and tell some jokes, which was amazing. And then I tried to make some of my colleagues go up and tell some clean jokes, but that was a struggle.
That was...
That was a bit of struggle. It's interesting too, from a psychological perspective. So I consider myself clean, but I do talk about pooping while giving birth, and then I also talk about with the birth of our son on Valentine's Day. He actually I went into labor a day early. It was scheduled for February 15th, and I tried to tell my then husband, they're probably not going to believe me because women do crazy things to have their babies on specific days.
Oh.
And I could have cared less if he was born on Valentine's Day because my birthday is 2 days after Christmas. My little brother, 5 years younger than me, is the exact same day.
Whoa.
My
Wow.
dad's birthday is 9 months earlier to the date. My mom's birthday is Christmas Day. And then we're a pastor family, and so Christmas is nuts.
Oh yeah.
And
Probably not
so
even fun.
so I was hoping as far away from holidays as possible. They didn't believe me. It took them forever to actually call my OB and get me pain medication, which is just another. I mean, yeah, birth in America is but so I finally get on the operating table. I joke that my son knew the world he was coming into because he actually came out fist first, and they had to shove it back in. So like something out of a zombie movie, but also the resistance,
Fight the power.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I was definitely a little groggy from the epidural, and my husband, he had the nurse take a picture of him and the baby, and then he sent it to a bunch of people. And then about an hour later, we got a call from my mom saying we should probably look in the upper left-hand corner of the picture, and it was my vagina.
Oh
Yes.
my gosh. Oh my God.
Yeah. And it's just from right under my chest down with my hand out. So if it was in black and white, it looks like we lost the mother, but the baby's healthy. So I have a bit where I say vagina quite a few times, and I just remember the first time I workshopped it, because there are more women coming up in the St. Louis scene, which is amazing, but it's primarily a white male field, and so they were just like, can't you call it something else? I'm like, no, I can't.
No,
I don't call it anything
going to,
else.
yeah.
So I'm not going to. And if you're uncomfortable
with the proper term,
you say it too many times. I'm like, nope, I don't. But so for that reason, I'm sometimes considered dirty.
Wow. Using the proper terminology is crossing the line.
Yeah.
Ouch.
But I don't think I have male counterparts who are much dirtier, but because the content is more comfortable, they're not considered as dirty. And so there's definitely a double standard with me being a woman up there talking.
I was just getting ready to ask about that because it is, like you said, predominantly male dominated, with the Netflix Marvelous Miss Maisel.
Yeah.
It wasn't Netflix. It was
Prime.
Amazon, yeah. So it's like, okay, there's maybe something that could show some gender differences. But, the reality is, so like, how do you cope with that? It sounds like you said the comedic scene in St. Louis has been pretty supportive.
So incredibly
But it's still probably, like you said, nuances like that, where...
It's a very real thing where it can feel, you can start to too, and I think this is maybe an example of male privilege where I can find myself questioning too, okay, did I make it on this because I'm funny? Which I am. I'll just be...
You made me laugh a couple times, so that's good. Yeah.
It's okay to say what you are.
Exactly. It's a strength. Yes.
But you can, early on, I was like, did I get this because I'm funny or because they needed to make sure they had at least one woman? You know what I mean? There's a questioning. And then also it goes in reverse where it's like, only one woman made the list.
Yeah.
Why didn't I also make the list? So it can be, which I don't know. I've never sat down with any of my white male counterparts and asked them if they ever feel that way, but my educated guess is that they do not. So, yeah.
Yeah, and it's, I encourage you to have that conversation with them and make them open their eyes or at least make them feel uncomfortable, right?
Right,
yeah.
right.
Have a little fun with it. Wow. We've been here today with Meredith Hopping, local comedian, mom, and, it's funny, beforehand, I was like, how do you want me to introduce you? Just kind of, we were prepping.
Yeah.
I was like, how about woman of power? And as you're talking, wow, yeah.
Well, thank you so
Yeah,
much.
I
That
mean,
means so much.
you've overcome a lot, and you continue to make a lot of strides. It sounds like so.
Thank you.
Pretty cool stuff you're doing.
Yeah.
And it's funny too. I had to like this sign earlier, so we had you, booked for today to come on the show, and then one of my coworkers, Debbie Dugan, the lovely Debbie Dugan, she sent me this text of who's coming to town because she knew I was a big Meredith Baxter Burney fan
Oh my
from back
goodness,
in the
I
day.
have a new bit about that right now.
Really?
That's who I'm named after.
She's whoa, really?
Yeah.
See, this was meant to
Yeah.
be. And she's coming to town?
I did not know that.
She just said the theater in Webster Groves repertory.
Really?
Yes, she's going to
Oh
be
my
here for like
goodness.
weeks at a time. You're going to be that close to Meredith Baxter Burney. So it's like I love and Mrs. Keaton, family ties, and apparently your parents were big fans of hers.
Yes, they were.
Wow, and you are named after her.
Named after her. But my bit is because not a lot of my peers know who she is, and people are like, they think like, oh, Meredith, it's probably after some like Welsh medieval princess or something.
Meredith.
And I'm like, no,
Yes.
it's Meredith Baxter Burney, the mom from Family Ties, and a couple of Lifetime movies
Yes.
you've never heard of. So that's why, because I joke about how this isn't completely true. He was watching a lot of Netflix, but people are like, could you see the divorce coming? And so I joke that he was watching a lot of Netflix, particularly The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up by Marie Kondo. And so he held me and decided I didn't spark joy anymore. But my middle name is Joy on top of it, which my parents had to do that after naming me after Meredith Baxter Burney. They had to shove something in there that was a little more spunky and...
Now, was your dad like had a thing for Meredith Baxter Burney? They just admired her.
They just admired her. If I was a girl, which I was, I was going to be Meredith Joy, and if I was a boy, it was going to be Matthew Josiah. So.
Oh, not the dad from Family Ties.
No.
Michael Gross. Wow, well, that's cool. That's cool.
So funny.
Yeah, so I was like, we got her, and then Meredith Hopping coming on a date, and Debbie sends me this text of Meredith Baxter Burney's coming to town. And so I'm like, all right,
So
it's going to be a
fun.
good
It's
day.
Meredith
And
Day.
then now you are actually named after her, so it's full circle for me.
Absolutely.
So hopefully we'll have her on the podcast.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
Oh, that's my goal.
Okay.
But, anyway, I have lots of goals that sometimes Midcoast Media does not help come through. Let's see if Chris actually listens all the way through the end of a podcast,
Come
right?
on, Chris, make it
Yeah,
happen.
make it happen. We will be tagging Meredith Baxter Burney in this podcast on social media. But anyway, we have had an excellent conversation,
Yes.
talking mental health, talking life, and some great examples of how you have handled a lot of stressors in your life. So once again, we've been with Meredith Hopping. Thank you so much for for actually coming on with us today.
Thank you.
And if you got any dates coming up or anything?
I do. Actually, if you want to come out July 22nd, I am in the semifinal round of the Funny Bone contest.
Whoa.
Yeah, I'm very excited about that. And then July 18th, I am actually on We Are Live, which is
I've heard of them.
Media. You've heard of them,
Yes.
maybe. Mid-Coast Media. We Are Live's Free Comedy Thursday at Southtown Pub.
Excellent. Well, good luck. And so
Thank
July
you very
22nd at Funny
much.
Bone?
Yes, I have free comps if anyone would like to come.
All right. Let's get out there and support Meredith Hopping. So thank you. And once again, this has been Mental Health Matters. If you are interested in checking us out and checking our services out, go to www. I don't even need to say www anymore.
No, you actually
No, it
don't.
made me sound like I'm kind of old. But anyway, go to stlouiscounseling.org. That's Saint spelled out, stlouiscounseling.org. Until next time, this is Mental Health Matters. Thank you.
This has been Mental Health Matters with Tom Duff of St. Louis Counseling Services. Check out stlouiscounseling.org for more information.